Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.
This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. Neighborhood change, like many other things, is inevitable. Yet where and why such change happens, and who makes those decisions, doesn't have to be. In other words, community development, which strikes many folks as a euphemism for gentrification, does not have to mean experts or investors coming in from the outside to tell residents how to save their neighborhood and making changes that push longtime community members out. And we have an example of that in We Collab. It's work with Invest STL and the West End and Visitation Park Neighborhood Plan. Here to share how that plan got started, what it contains, and how it made its way to adoption this week by the city of St. Louis, we welcome two longtime West End residents. Lisa Potts, We Collab Steering Committee member, welcome.
Thank you.
And April Walker, We Collab Lead Neighborhood Ambassador. Welcome to you too.
Thank you.
And thank you both for being here today. Now, how would you describe the West End and Visitation Park neighborhoods, Lisa?
So geographically, the West End is on the west side of St. Louis, but most important is north of Delmar.
Okay.
And so for people, wherever you are, people can Google what the Delmar Divide means. Mm-hmm. And so basically we have this inequality. So north side of Delmar is, tends to be lower income, lower housing values, whereas literally across the street, the housing values particularly triple.
Yeah. No, April, when it comes to the neighborhood that people don't see or know, how would you describe West End and Visitation Park?
Yes, when you talk about the people who live in our neighborhoods, the people are there for each other. When I first moved into my neighborhood, which was way back in 1994, my neighbors came out on the porch and they said, "What's your name? What are you doing?" Kids ran down the street to come help me plant flowers. The people care about each other in our community, and that's what makes West End Visitation Park an amazing neighborhood.
Yeah, so you've been there for a long time.
Yes.
And what would you say that your relationship is to the area?
Oh, I love it. I recently heard someone say, I used to always be ashamed to say I'm from St. Louis. And I'm like, where does that come from? I've never been ashamed to say I'm from St. Louis, and I've never been ashamed to say I'm from the West End. Yeah. I love living in the West End.
Mm-hmm. And Lisa, how long have you been a resident there?
It's 20 years this year. I'm celebrating my 20-year anniversary. Okay. And when I finish doing some rehab, I'm going to have a whole 20-year party at my house.
And how did you end up moving to that neighborhood?
It was by choice. I looked all around the city, and it ended up that I settled there because of the historic homes. Mm-hmm. The homes in our neighborhood are unique like no other. And when I stepped into my backyard, I was sold. I had 2 small kids at the time, and my house sits on 3 city lots, and I have like a carriage house in the back. And all I could envision was me throwing the biggest birthday parties ever for my kids. So that, it was great. The proximity to the park, to the loop, is centrally located.
Yeah, yeah. Have there been forces over the years that have made you consider leaving the neighborhood? April?
Yes. In the 90s, when I lived in my neighborhood, the gangs were rampant. And I had 2 young boys, and my son ran home off the school bus one day saying, "Mom, they trying to beat me into the gang." And I was like, I stood out on my front porch, and I said, "Not here, not here." And they looked at me and, they thought I was crazy, to stand up to them. But from then on, whenever some boys would come outside the neighborhood, they would say, "No, don't mess with him, man. His mom.
Don't mess with him." You.
Exactly, exactly. So that was disheartening, of course. But I had purchased my home there, so I wasn't going anywhere. Okay. So I had to stand up and, fight and say, no, we're not going to do this. But I also started programs for the kids. I would pile kids in my van and we would go to the movies. We did cookouts. We would roast hot dogs. We did block cleanups together.
Yeah.
So I started doing things for the kids in the community, which made them kind of, leave us alone and look at it. Well, she's not there to hurt. She's there to help. So we're not going to mess with her and her children.
And were you doing that informally?
Yes, it was just me or a few of the neighbors getting together and doing it. I said, come on, let's do this. And they're like, yeah, okay. So yeah, the neighbors and we got together and did this for our community.
Yeah. Lisa, is that something that you experienced over the years you were raising your kids? And
yeah, in a different way. So my kids I used to take them, walk them to the bus stop every day. And even though it was on the corner, I wanted to be there and, I wanted to take their picture, which they hated, but I wanted to take their picture, for the first day of school and stuff like that. And I was afraid for my kids to walk around the corner to the barbershop or to the convenience store. So when this opportunity came along to get involved in reshaping the neighborhood, I was all in because I've done this in other neighborhoods. I used to be a neighborhood stabilization officer for the city of St. Louis, and it was one of my favorite jobs. But I used to be helping with the Sustainable Neighborhoods Plan back in 2004, where I actually helped residents develop resident-led community plans. Mm-hmm. So I've helped do this work, but for other people.
Right.
So when this opportunity came along to do this for my neighborhood, it was a no-brainer.
And when you say this opportunity,
yes.
What is this opportunity?
It was a grant opportunity through Invest STL. I hadn't heard of it. I think one of my neighbors who I had not known just put it out on Facebook, and it had my name on it. I'm like, I'm going to show up there, and it was about, grassroots organizations looking to take their community to the next level. It really emphasized neighborhoods who had been marginalized and, impacted by racism. And so everything that they described felt right. And so you had to attend the meeting. Mm-hmm. So we attended the meeting and people asked, where do you live? And so people started raising their hands saying, I live in the West End, and all these hands went up. And I started looking around the room and seeing these beautiful Black women that I had never met before.
Sure.
And immediately after the meeting, we got together and said, we need to talk, we need to meet. And we met at one person's kitchen table, and the rest was history.
And were you at that meeting too?
No, I wasn't at that meeting.
So what was your entry into this effort?
Yes, in 2019, I started working for the 2020 census. And so I was the only census recruiter in the city of St. Louis. So I went everywhere. Oh, okay. But when I met with the people from the West End, I met with them at the Y down on Page, and I started talking about the census, how important it is in the Black community to get counted. And then Lisa was like, we have a West End plan. Come to our meetings, come to our events, and talk about the census. So I started doing that. And as I started doing it, I started listening about what they were doing. I'm like, this is right here in my own neighborhood. So I need to get more involved. And so from then on, I started getting involved. And Lisa, when they start to hire people from the community to do community engagement, Lisa was like, we want April. If April can do this, be the only one in the census, yes, and do this, then she can also come and run our community engagement. And so that's how I got involved.
Okay, so it was really this grant opportunity then that brought you together. And what was it? What was the work that you were doing together after that first kitchen table meeting?
So the biggest thing was trying to bring the community together. Our community had lots of smaller organizations that were doing great work in their own right, but nobody was talking to each other. And so part of the hurdle was for us to go to them and say, listen, we have an opportunity to come together as a neighborhood to join forces and do something great for our community. Because what we knew was West End is perfectly situated. We're on the other side of, the U-City Loop. We're on the other side of Skinker to Bolivar, Central West End. Mm-hmm. When you talk about opening up a business, location, we knew people were coming into our neighborhood. Some of us were already getting notes saying, can I buy your house? Mm-hmm. So we already knew people were coming. So we needed to get in front of that. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to control that narrative and to let people know this is our neighborhood, and we want to make sure that we control what comes in it.
Yeah. And so you were working on a community plan.
Correct.
What is a community plan April or Lisa?
So it's a comprehensive plan that basically it's a roadmap. It's a blueprint for what will happen in your neighborhood. And so this happens to be over the next 20 years. And so it looks at your existing conditions, zoning, what does your housing look like, opportunities for businesses, your streetscape, infrastructure, all of those things we had an opportunity to look at. Like we literally walked the streets. We did a parcel survey where we surveyed every vacant building in our community. And we had to then go out into a community with big maps and gave people dots and sticky notes and say, tell us what you like about these streets, about these houses, about these parks. And our planners had to synthesize all of that, also look at every other plan that had already been done in the city of St. Louis. So they weren't just talking to us. They had to do their homework and their research and then layer all of that into resident voice and then create a path forward.
Now, 20 years, that's a long time. Is there a reason that you're thinking about a 20-year plan instead of one, that's a little bit shorter or one that's longer?
Yeah, well, when you look at our neighborhood, it's going to take 20 years to bring it to where we want it to be. And plus, we do want to invite younger people in. So we really want to reach out to the younger people and tell them to be a part of this plan. As people grow up, we want them to get involved and see what's going on in the community so that they can be a part of it. And they can look and say, yeah, I helped renovate that building, or I said I wanted that there, that park there. So we want it to be long term. We don't want it to be something short. We don't want our plan to sit on the shelf. We want it to be keep evolving, keep growing. I want to also comment about the community coming together. Even though people think community have no voice, you're just a person that lives in the community. How can you stop developers? How can you? But we have put together an organization called the Development Review Committee so that if developers come in and they need tax abatement or they need anything from the community or from the city of St. Louis, they have to go through us. They have to go through our alderperson who is part of our plan, to get things done. So that's another part of the community plan. Make sure you have things in place so that your voice matters.
I did read somewhere that this process that you have been going through has been considered sort of untraditional. Why is that the case, Lisa?
It's untraditional because when we say it's really resident-led, it really is. And Invest STL empowered us to make real decisions. When we actually wrote the request for proposals, or called the RFP, to hire the planner that came in, we interviewed, I think we had 13 organizations from across the country that applied to do this work. We interviewed them several times. We had public meetings to get additional public input, signed off on invoices. They couldn't get paid if we didn't agree that the work had been done.
Sure.
It has been unprecedented from day one, and we owe all thanks to Invest STL. And I want to mention, too, when you talked about the 20-year plan, we do have, it's broken up into what can you do in 1 to 2 years, what can you do from 3 to 5, et cetera. Because you have to have small wins. We can't just say it's going to take us 20 years to get here. We have to do things constantly. And so we have 5 focus areas that we have concentrated on that we're going to have staff to help support that and do further engagement. This is just the beginning. So if anybody thinks now that the plan has been adopted, it's done, while we're excited about that, this is a beginning of a brand new chapter.
Sure. We'll hear a little bit more about that. We're going to take a very quick break here, but when we come back, we will continue this conversation. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. I'm talking today with Lisa Potts, We Collab Steering Committee member, and with April Walker, We Collab Lead Neighborhood Ambassador. We Collab is the resident organization that's been the driving force behind the West End and Visitation Park Neighborhood Plan. It's a plan not meant to save, but to make the neighborhood what its residents want it to be. I'd like to introduce another guest into this conversation who's actually been sitting in the talk studio with us all this time, and that is Dara Eskridge, who's the executive director at Invest STL, and as producer Maya Norfleet put it, an urban planner who uses her powers for good. So, Dara, welcome to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you. I like that tagline. I'll have to start using it.
Now, Dara, Lisa and April have mentioned Invest STL. They've talked about the grant. Tell us about what Invest STL is and about this grant that has made this work possible.
So Invest STL has been around since 2012, but it's really in the last few years where we kind of used the pandemic to pause and think about what is our purpose in the St. Louis landscape. You know, in the region, there are a lot of organizations and players and actors and decision makers, specifically in the community and economic development space. And so what we realize is, you know, we don't necessarily need another organization, right, that's going to be doing things and that the system has to figure out how to take care of in perpetuity. Instead, we've got a generation's worth of work in front of us to really shore up the system and build up the power and the alignment within the system so that we're helping to produce neighborhoods that are worthy of the lifetimes of the people who are there. And that's really our work. So we do neighborhood level investing. That's really investing in the power of people to drive the trajectory of their neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. We do policy piloting to advance the system towards equitable neighborhood development. And then we do a lot around storytelling and narrative reframing so that we're able to equip the region with more complex and nuanced understanding of our neighborhoods and the power and the will and the beauty and the wisdom that's within them.
Yeah. So insofar as working sort of in the area where West End and Visitation Park neighborhoods are located, how did that happen? I mean, you could have gone anywhere in the city, right? Ostensibly.
So, as Lisa mentioned, there was a request for proposals that was put out in 2018. And you know, Invest STL has evolved over time. So this actually preceded Invest STL having staff. But through that process, 2 neighborhoods were selected, and the West End and Visitation Park were one of the neighborhoods. Since that time, you know, it's really been trying to tailor the grant and the support and our team support towards making sure that the residents and their neighborhood partners have the tools and the space that they need to drive the process in the way that they want to.
Mm-hmm. So that works in sort of the opposite direction from what we think about as far as sort of conventional or traditional or what we're used to community development goes. Like you went to them rather than it's being completely the other way around. And I want to note that I think the seating arrangement in here is it's reflective or kind of embodies how we collab and Invest STL has worked together, because Lisa and April, you're sitting closest to me and Dara is seated, you know, near the back of the room. And that's really the sense that I've gotten from, you know, what you all have talked about and what I've read. Now, Lisa, you had talked about the adoption of the plan by the city of St. Louis, and that just happened.
Yes.
What was that like? And I know that was also unprecedented in a way.
Yes, it was. In a lot of ways. First of all, it was the first time the planning team had gotten together since COVID, so that wasn't such a big deal. But what was a big deal is the planning commission came to our neighborhood. Mm. They came to the West End. That is unprecedented.
Okay.
So we were very excited about that. Every commissioner, I think we had a unanimous decision. No one had questions, but everybody had an amazing comment to share about their hopes and their visions for us. And they were genuinely excited. Also, so one of the planning commissioners is a West End resident, Jake Banton. Our alderperson, Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard was a commissioner. She lives in the West End. So it was amazing on so many levels. Also, we residents presented the plan. That also usually doesn't happen. When you pay a planning consultant, they usually want to come in and present their plan.
Their plan.
Yeah,
Yes.
our planning consultant sat on the side and did tech support.
Okay.
We presented the plan, and when the audio didn't work, he got up to help fix it. And he even acknowledged that has never been done. He had never seen it before, but he has embraced it. I think he's gonna move differently when he works in other communities.
April, expectations were high for
Yes.
adoption.
Yes.
Why was that the case?
Well, we knew that it was going to get adopted. We had worked too hard for it not to be. And we knew this was an excellent plan because we had just won an award, an international award from the charter award from CNU. And we were down in Charlotte, North Carolina last week to receive that award. And they said the same thing, that it had never been done before. They had never seen a resident plan like this, where residents were at the forefront from beginning to the end.
Yeah.
And that's what the commissioners said. They said they had never had a lively group like ours before present a plan. And one of the commissioners said, so this gives us hope that from now on, planned adoptions don't have to be dead. They said that looking at the way we presented and the way we gave it, they said, okay, so we got to have something different here.
Okay.
We can't just keep going the way it's been going. Yeah. So they realized that this is the way to go.
So it's not just the energy, it was also what was in the plan. Now, what does the plan do? And specifically, Lisa, what are the 5 areas of the plan?
So you're going to have to make me use my cheat sheet. So there are 5 focus areas. So we have Goodfellow and Maple. So Maple and Goodfellow, the Tracks and Union, Delmar and DeBolivar, and Page and Blackstone. And what's interesting is that when you look at our map, they're centered around throughout the community. They're kind of almost like perfectly spaced out.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there are also other things along the way that are happening that make sense to support as well. Like we have our old Cook School that's huge and it's in the middle of one of the areas. Delmar Divine is on Delmar that's continuing to be developed. But each of those focus areas, our plan now is to have an ambassador to help lead continued engagement around each of those areas. So we look at it as we're going to have 5 mini plans within here so that we can then take that and activate it out.
Okay. And Dara, for you, I mean, looking at the result of what Invest STL has supported and continues to support, and with your background as an urban planner, not just here in St. Louis, but elsewhere as well, what stands out to you as sort of the biggest opportunity, or maybe the thing that has been done differently here that feels like this is going to work and it's going to work really well?
It's the ownership of the plan. One, it is deeply satisfying, for the neighborhood and for us to be on this journey with them for years, right? And I think that there was some doubt that crept in, right? Maybe this isn't the right approach. Maybe we've gone too far askew of the norms, and we're starting to see that maybe it won't work. And so it's deeply satisfying to watch those residents present the plan, and not, I want to say, like, it is power in seeing residents present a plan for their neighborhood, but they were able to do that because it is their plan. They know what's in it, right? They didn't need to be coached to know what to say. But the plan itself, I mean, it's robust, right? It talks about having a mix of housing and safety and street addressing and sustainability and looking at the economic scale of the neighborhood. So all of those things are in there, and that is wonderful. That's what makes it a comprehensive plan. But like we've said all along, we're not promising that the plan will yield, something that is so different from what you would typically see in a neighborhood. But the process that supports the residents in really leading it and owning it, that's the magic. Because then that means that they're also going to own implementation, which means that they're going to make sure that they have the partners and the resources at the table and that they're staying at the table to usher implementation. And they're going to, welcome in and apply pressure when needed. That's where the magic is. That's the special thing that gets it from being something that just sits on a shelf and something that truly can be activated and realized in, the time frame that they set out.
Right.
That's what I think St. Louis and the field of planning can pick up on. When you have residents at the beginning driving the direction, they're going to be accountable to making sure that it is a plan that serves them and that it comes into reality.
Right. And is there like a specific thing that you think with this plan that Invest STL can play a part in making a reality? For example, with safety, that's something that a lot of people think about, that they talk about. April, you mentioned what your experience was as you were raising your kids.
Yes.
What are some of the maybe one of the specifics around this plan insofar as changing or building up the community?
Well, so one, the way that Invest STL moves is we show up where we're asked to show up, right? So we fill the role and do the things that the residents ask us to. And what is top of mind for them right now as they prepare for implementation is actually this one thing that is in the plan that is different from what you see in a lot of plans, is this concept of a neighborhood operating system. Usually plans are focused on the built environment, the actionable things that will, come out of the plan. They rarely talk about what's the people infrastructure needed to move into implementation. And so if you go through the plan, the neighborhood operating system, it talks about all these partners that Lisa and April had mentioned that are in the neighborhood, but it sets up a structure for them to actually manage the day-to-day implementation of the plan. But, it takes resources and training and support to get that infrastructure in place. So we already know that that's the first place that we've been asked to lean in and where we absolutely will be supporting. And we're doing that right now because we continue to meet with the steering committee every other Tuesday to start building up this infrastructure.
Okay. And as far as safety goes, April, what are your hopes for better safety in the West End and Visitation Park area?
Yes, hopefully we will use the data-informed community engagement to make sure that all neighbors feel safe. You have to talk to your neighbors. You can't be afraid to live on your block. You can't be afraid of your neighbors. So speaking to them, talking to them, and getting their input. Sometimes neighbors don't know that they're a nuisance. They don't know that they're doing something wrong. They just living their life. But to, show them, well, you guys are kind of loud at night, or, whatever's happening, can we discuss it? What can we do to change and work it? Talking to neighbors, which is, one of my strengths because I love my neighbors. That is how we can, work together and try to ensure safety, as well as partnering with the police and, things like that. We have meetings with them once a month. They come, they tell us about, what's the crime reports and things like that. Working through those things is another way.
And what would be, Lisa, just to wrap up here, what would be the first thing that people will see that will indicate that this plan is working?
The first thing that first they're going to see us, because we're getting ready to plan the biggest celebration that we have ever seen. I might need some more money, Dara. But no, we're going to plan a big celebration. We want to we want to invite even more people out. I will say that we had a packed house the other night as well. When you talked about what was different about that hearing. I don't know how many people that room was set up for, but it wasn't an empty seat in the house. It was packed. But we want to visually now show people where we're going to be, what are the focus areas, give people an opportunity to come to some additional meetings and get involved. Sign up for your favorite focus area. Sign up for the area that you're most passionate about, maybe because you live around the corner, or maybe because you pass by this street every day and you're tired of looking at it in its condition. Don't complain, get involved. And that's what that's what we're going to be soon telling people.
Yes.
And one more thing I do want to ask April, if people were to come and look at this plan, where's the best place to start to understand what the plan is going to do?
I think, like Lisa said, the focus areas, because there's like 6 pages for each focus area. And so if you live in a certain area and you really want to know what's going to happen in that area, go to that area. And then it'll tell you what we would like to see in that area, but you can also add what you would like to see. Someone once said to me that they wanted a laundromat. I never thought of a laundromat we don't have one in our community because most people have washers and dryers in their home. It never even occurred to me. Someone else, said we need a grocery store. We used to just getting in our car and driving to U City or driving down the street.
So it'd be great to see those things come in the community.
So those things, people going to their focus area and saying, this is what I want to see, this is what we need, and then we start from there.
April Walker is We Collab Lead Neighborhood Ambassador. Lisa Potts is We Collab Steering Committee Member. And Dara Eskridge is Executive Director of Invest STL. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Our podcast proudly supports St. Louis artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.